What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How's everybody doing out there on this Wednesday, May 24th of 2023? Before we get into all the fun stuff, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Find us on the socials. Go search the Alex Cuesta Show. We're there. So this week, any astute listener knows last week, Dave and I weren't around. We had a guest that fell through, and then we kind of were like, maybe there's a good opportunity, take a week off, take a break. But David, being the lazy bitch that he is, decided he wanted 2 weeks off. Nah, David's not feeling too well, so he's not going to be with us on the show today. He's just, doing his thing. Sometimes we all get under the weather, and that's okay. But Dave will be back next week. Before we get into this week's show, definitely go back and listen to 2 weeks ago show. We talked to one of mine and David's good buddies, Pat Adibamoa. We got into a whole bunch of stuff, life after an athlete, talking some WWE stuff. Like, it was a really good show. So certainly go back and give that a listen. But this week, we have on a friend of the show, someone that, I don't even realize how many years I've known him now. It's been a really long time since we were both writing on Nothing But Nets. He is Brandon Scoopy Robinson. He's the lead NBA insider at Bally Sports and host of Scoopy Radio Podcast. What's going on, brother?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm glad to sit here with you and talk shop and tell your brother stop being a lazy SOB.
I do. And he said he loves you and he misses you and he's sorry.
I love you too, man. We'll make it happen again. But nonetheless, man, I'm glad to sit here with you and talk all things, everything. That's everything.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it because, what you do is basketball and things going on in basketball that most people don't. Even though you're a man without sources, you do really good for being a dude without sources. So I want to jump on. Carmelo Anthony recently announced his retirement. It's been a really nice, the NBA showing him love, him saying all great things about, his career was a success the moment he shook David Stern's hand on 03. Kind of talk about, you covered Melo your whole career. So kind of talk about your favorite Melo moments, things that you got to talk to him about and do with him and things like that.
Well, Melo and I are around the same age. So a lot of we have mutual friends in both city, Jersey, Maryland, Philly. Just, I remember him being written about in Slam and his cohorts being Amari Stoudemire, LeBron James, and others, Lenny Cook. And Lenny, I went to Don Bosco, so Lenny and I had a lot of connectivity there. But Melo himself was just a brilliant basketball player. I really think that Melo, or I don't want to say think or wish, but actually I more wish Melo had stayed a little longer at Syracuse just because that draft class was so heavy with talent. Everybody talks about Bron, Wade, Bosh, Kyle Korver, TJ Ford, just all of those talented guys. But to me, I wish Melo had stayed another year because I just think that his brilliance and his talent gets lost in translation because of the championship talk, the Bosh, Wade, LeBron experiment in Miami that worked, and people just assuming that, or people just saying that, Melo cared more about the money. And I think while that may be true, I think he had some brilliant moments. I also think he played in a very tough Western Conference during his Denver days, and then the New York days. He had a Heat team that was just more dominant.
Yep.
And then towards the end, it just was this multi-team cluster junk. But I think Melo, to me, first ballot Hall of Famer,
without a doubt,
and more. Melo and I really connected on when he had his pro camps in New York for many years in the city, and that kind of relationship blossomed into, as I was growing in my career, freelancing, and then landing at in the big ranks, I guess you could say. But Melo has always made himself available to me. Melo has shared things with me. Melo has just been. I'm in the process of redoing my office and framing things and putting things in their respective places. And the two jerseys that I have that are signed, one is a Carmelo Anthony Denver Nuggets jersey that he signed for me, and the other is a Kyrie Irving Boston Celtics jersey that he signed for me in green marker. And I'm very excited to hang both of those up because those two guys have been very instrumental to my career. And I kind of feel like with Melo specifically, I was able to pay it forward in some aspects. I remember when it was very difficult for Melo to sign with a team, and the Blazers ended up signing him. And maybe a week or two prior, I was at a function in Manhattan, and I had gotten a call. I was in Chicago, and they said, "Yo, Melo's doing this thing," and I'm like, "Okay, I'll be back home. What's the date and what's the time?" So I ended up going, and then during that process, me and other members of the press got this email, and they were like, "Melo's not doing any press. He's accepting his award, taking his pictures, and he's leaving." So we get to the event. Melo walks up, he takes his pictures, and he walks over to me. He's like, "What's going on?" I said, "It's a whole bunch of press standing there." I'm like, "Yo, they saying you not talking." He said, "Who said that?" I said, "Some lady sent some email." He looked at me, he goes, "What you want to know?" And me and him are just standing over there talking. And then all the press start walking over to us. And it's like a moment. So I'm like, let me get all my questions in and tweet all this sugar honey iced tea ASAP. Internet went crazy. And the part that really kind of dragged on the internet a lot is I 2,000% expect to play this season. And lo and behold, like a week or two later, that's what happened. And then, over the last couple years, just at my role at Bally, expanded, his time with the Lakers, and then just dealing with free agency this offseason, seen and unseen conversations we were having, even in just press conferences across the country, whether it was in Washington, whether it was in Philly, whether it was in LA, just hallway conversations, press conference, like formal conversations offline, and just all that stuff. He's just, it's been as I've grown in my career, I've watched him grow in his career, and just, knowing his family, getting to know people in his inner circle, just all of that stuff. It's just he's been practice for where I am now. Both he and Kyrie. And I've always tried to be fair, balanced with the both of them. And I'm glad to see Melo getting his flowers as he announced his retirement.
He certainly deserves it. For me, you talked about that draft class. And I think out of that class, I know people are going to put him behind, LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. I like Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh was fantastic in Toronto, played his role well at Miami. I think Melo deserves to be third on that list, regardless of not getting the championships. Because I think, LeBron's LeBron. He's going to end up as somebody's 1A or 1B in all-time greats between him and Michael, right? That's right there. Dwayne Wade, what he was able to do in Miami was ridiculous. Just being able to, put that team on his shoulders. Yes, he had Shaq, but Shaq was an older Shaq. And, so he did a lot there. So he definitely deserves that second bidding. I think Melo, people forget. They look at it now, and even like the younger generation that watches things didn't see Denver Melo, didn't see New York Melo. And just the fact that he's a easily top 10, arguably top 5 scorer to ever play the game. Like, maybe not overall player, but the man made things look so smooth when he was trying to score, and the difficulty in the shots that he was making. I mean, like, people just need to go back and watch Carmelo Anthony scoring highlights. It was a joy to watch him play. And I hate the knock against him that he couldn't win. When we look at what happened throughout his career, yes, on Denver, they'll say he had J.R. Smith. He had Chauncey Billups. He had a young J.R. Smith who was still trying to find his game. I'll say that. He didn't have his game perfected. And Chauncey was a little bit older. So, yes, Chauncey was a good player. But, Melo he had a good supporting cast, not great. In New York, he had the opportunity. If Amari Stoudemire doesn't break his hand, I think they have a very good opportunity to make a deep run. So there were things that happened to Carmelo throughout his career that I think hindered his championship chances. But man, just looking back, just he was such a joy and, a thorn in my ass being a Nets fan, watching him do what he did in New York. So, yeah, he definitely deserves his flowers. Easily a first ballot Hall of Famer. It's not even a question. One of the greatest scorers to ever play the game, one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And yep, congratulations, Mela. You deserve, all the praise you're getting in retirement, my man.
Yep, that's it.
That's absolutely it. So you mentioned Kyrie Irving. Let's talk some Kai. Kai had a huge announcement today, and it's awesome that, I'm having you come on today, and then all of a sudden his Instagram live happens, and I'm like, no one better to have coming on my podcast tonight when Kyrie makes the announcement. So talk a little bit about what Kyrie said today, Scoop, and what the big announcement was.
Shouldn't you ask Kyrie? I don't know anything that he has going on. What do you mean?
You don't know nothing at all. You and Kyrie aren't cool. You're not, he doesn't even know you.
No, I mean, he went on Instagram Live and just discussed his future. He's not in a rush to make his decision on what's next, and just little tidbits, sneaker deal in the works, and more. Telling people to stop adding him, which means add him more. And a myriad of other things. He cornered the market, and he's smart. I'll tell you something. Many people may not know this. Kyrie understands the media thing outside of being in the public eye because of two big reasons. One, did you know that his stepmother is an executive at BET?
Nope, had no idea.
That's one. His stepmother, who's also his agent, Shatelia Riley Irving, is an executive with BET. So we're talking BET Awards, we're talking movie junkets, we're talking all types of things. Did you also know that his stepmother was very interested? So do you remember when Power 105 first came to New York?
Yep.
Guess who was on the board and very active in getting it into New York City?
I can imagine it was his stepmother.
Yes. He understands the media game very well. And I'll leave that there. To me, Kyrie going on Instagram Live was no different than LeBron having a conversation about retirement. You and I have had conversations about retirement.
Yes, we have. You and your fake ass retirements.
That's why I understand what they're both are doing so well.
Absolutely.
I'll leave it there.
And I really thought for a little bit that Kyrie was going to go his own way, going to go like the Stephon Marbury route or even the Spencer Dinwiddie route and make his own shoe line, which I thought would have been incredible, right? Because a guy like Kyrie making his own line, it would have definitely put pressure on your Nikes. It would have put pressure on your Adidas. It would have put pressure on all of your shoe brands to figure out what's going to go on. Because if he would have been successful, what would have stopped any of these other superstars from doing it? So, it's interesting what he's doing. And like you said, he does understand the media. And you can see just by the way Kyrie talks, people talk about some of the things that he says in press conferences and the way he is. He's a calculated and measured dude. He's not saying anything he's not prepared for. So when Kai speaks and he knows he's saying something that might be controversial or is controversial, he'll know what it is. He's ready for that backlash. I fully believe he's ready for whatever backlash comes. Now, maybe he might not be ready for the aptitude of it or how big it gets. That might surprise him. But overall, he knows what he's saying. So, Kai making waves. You mentioned LeBron making waves with his nonsense about retirement. I think LeBron at least has another 4 or 5 years in him. That's just
I think he's putting pressure on the Lakers front office to make moves.
Now, do you think he wants to stay with the Lakers? Because I'm convinced he's going to work with Silver to try and get Bronny wherever he wants to be. My conspiracy is he spends his last 2 years on the Knicks with Bronny. That is my conspiracy, that he's talked about playing in New York for a long time, the Mecca. I figure they're going to figure out a way. We know those ping pong balls bounce the way the NBA wants them to bounce, right? So I think that New York is his final destination. That's just my feeling.
I'm not sure. I've always felt that it would be any iteration of Oklahoma, Cleveland, or Orlando. It's cool to be in New York again now, so maybe that is the thing.
Yep.
To directly answer your first question, do I think he's going to stay with the Lakers? I think that anytime LeBron James plays on a team, they have a 2 to 2.5 year window.
Yep.
And then it becomes outgrown. And then the next place he goes to, it's what it is. It's a great place to be. So we saw that in Miami. We saw that in his return back to Cleveland. We're seeing that in LA. And you often see the power forward center become a jump shooter or a guard. You saw that with Bosh. We see that with Anthony Davis.
Kevin Love, and even though Kevin Love came in as that role, but even more, he was relegated to that.
Yes. So I just think, I mean, if we take LeBron at his recent word about not wanting to play with his son anymore, then I hear him, but I think that's kind of dumbing it down because we just don't know what shape that's going to take. Like we talked at the beginning of the show about Melo, and Melo maybe staying a little bit longer. Like Bronny doesn't have to rush to go to the NBA, especially if he loves college.
That's true.
He's not hurting for money. I think a lot of people criticized his game based upon who his dad is. I've watched his game in person. Very talented, but I think what LeBron's going to do is contingent upon maybe what his son is going to do and what his body tells him. And I'm not sure if that's which comes first.
Do you think LeBron's going to be able to make kind of late season adjustment that, Kobe made, Michael made, a lot of these guys that made their living driving the paint? And then as the career gets later, they're definitely more jump shooters picking their spots going in. Do you think LeBron is going to be able to make that adjustment and last longer? Or is it kind of when he can't continue to run up and down the floor, can't continue to just attack the basket at will, like when that starts to take a real physical toll more than it is now, he's going to call it a career because his jump shot has gotten better.
The only crazy injury that he had was year one with the groin. And I've spoken to guys on that team who were describing his rehab process. And that process to me, from doctors that I spoke to and Lakers officials that I spoke to, they were saying like, the fact that he came back from that was just like, if it was anybody else, absolutely not, right? But I feel like that was the only crazy injury. Kobe had the Achilles. Michael pretty much came out unscathed. Like when he was playing for the Wizards, I remember just his knees being swollen a lot. And he'd rest often. But I think in answer to your question, like, to me, what LeBron is doing would have been the same thing a healthy Tracy McGrady would have done. But I just think there's more out there, sports medicine wise. Like I was talking to my trainer about this the other day. I was like, what is it about LeBron that he's able, like, what type of exercises specifically? And he was kind of going through those things and what those things were at that age. The Pilates, the cardio, the weight training, but the balance of all of that mixed with just making smart decisions and where he was going, those kind of go hand in hand. Like, you build the team. You don't let the team build the team, or you work in tandem with the team rather than you just putting tons of pounding on the pavement.
I like it. I like it. It's a good insight to what LeBron is going to do. And, I listen, I'll tell everyone, I say it all the time, until LeBron retires, he's one of those rare dudes. I believe he's the best player in the league every year. There's Giannis, there's Steph, there's all these guys that do great things, but nobody means more to his team than LeBron. Maybe Steph Curry is the only other guy that means that much to his team. So it's interesting. I hope LeBron plays longer. I love watching LeBron play. I love watching historical guys like that play. Speaking of history, I want to slide into the playoffs because my only gripe with the playoffs is how long it is, but I feel like this playoffs particularly has been really interesting. Now, we had the chance, and the NBA was probably salivating at getting a Celtics-Lakers final. Obviously, LeBron took it as far as he could with the Western Conference Finals, but Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, those Denver Nuggets, swept the Lakers. They're heading into the finals. Celtics are staving off elimination in Game 4, beating the Heat up 3-1. I think it's only a matter of time before Jimmy Butler, closes the door on the Celtics, which is crazy to think about. I'm looking towards a Heat Nuggets finals. If that were to occur, because it's not foregone, but if that were to occur, who would be your favorite in that situation?
Ask me that question again.
If Nuggets and Heat were to be the finals, who would you have as the favorite there?
The Nuggets.
And why?
Because they're the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets just have something. I spent time with them on the road, and their mindset in January was the same that it is in May, June. I think their bench is deep. I think that outside of Jokic, I still think they'd be a competitive team. I think their second unit could start on any first unit in the NBA. And they don't have a lot of drama. I like their coach. I think that their attention to detail is stellar. I think that there are just a lot of things there that are top notch. I like the Heat. I think that people think names, like, for example, right? You look at the Suns. People look at the Suns. They don't have no bench because they don't have names.
Yep. But
then you look at the Miami Heat. They don't have any names, but they have a bench. That's just crazy how that works.
Yeah.
I think when you look at Jimmy Butler and you look at his body of work, I like it. But I also, as an NBAer, Memorial Day weekend is a long weekend. I'd like to see the Celtics drag this thing out the whole weekend. I just would.
So would you think differently about the series if Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo were available and healthy? Would that change your opinion of if the Heat have a better chance against the Nuggets?
I think Tyler and Oladipo being out pushes them even harder. And the crazy thing is, if they do go to the finals, they'll have a healthy Tyler Hero coming back.
Yep. That's going to be real interesting there to see what they can do. Now, I like the Heat a lot. I think the Nuggets are the better team, but it's hard to deny playoff Jimmy. And I think there's a heart in me that wants to see Jimmy get a title because I'm tired of their people, being people saying like, well, Jimmy Butler, I don't know if he's a superstar. And it's like, wait a minute. Jimmy Butler is absolutely a superstar. There hasn't been a team that he hasn't played on that hasn't been into the playoffs. When LeBron was at his peak in the East, him and Paul George were the only two dudes that could even imagine slowing down LeBron at all on the Bulls and on the Pacers. So I just want to see all the talk ending, and I think Nikola Jokic is going to be there again after this year. So that's my personal vibe with that. What do you think about Jimmy Butler and whether he's a superstar talk or not?
He's a superstar, regardless of whether people want to acknowledge it or not. And I think we're just in this era of people needing to be validated. He knows who he is.
Yep.
And I don't really think people praising him will change his demeanor either way.
I don't think so either. He's an old school type of dude. very much would have been fine in the 90s, very much would have been fine in the early 2000s because of just how much of a dog he is, how much he wants to work. I'm confident we have the same Jimmy Butler in that era as we do now.
I'm with you.
So I also want to ask you, Eric Spoelstra right now, I think, is one of the greatest coaches of all time, just with his body of work. If the Heat end up winning, does he go into that Popovich, Phil Jackson type of class of coach, or is he already there?
He's already there.
Yeah, I love what he's doing. I absolutely love what he's doing. I think the fact that he got them there in the bubble and now it looks like he's poised to get him back to the finals, it's pretty incredible. And you can't just say that he was getting there now because of LeBron and Wade and things like that. Like, he's a bona fide, ridiculously skilled coach that I would love for him to get fired and come to the Nets.
Wishful thinking.
Speaking of teams that might have to go back to the drawing board, talk to me about both the Sixers and the Celtics right now, where the Celtics should have been the favorites to get in this series, looking like their backs are against the wall, that they're probably going to be eliminated, which, if not, I'll eat my words. No team's ever come back from 3-0, but almost can't deny Brown and Tatum. They have the ability. But what do Philly, who's looking like they're about to lose Harden, have to do to get better? And what can Boston do right now? Because losing to the Heat right now would definitely be disappointing for a team that has the players that they have with the expectations they have.
So for Philly, I think they need a coach first. I mean, I know that, recent talk has suggested that Frank Vogel, a local product from South Jersey area, is a leading candidate. I think that for Philly, they still have a good system with Embiid and Maxey if Harden leaves. We've seen iterations of that prior to Harden coming there.
Yep.
And this is a Sixers team that if Harden leaves, the team that they are now was the team that they were when Ben Simmons was banished and they were looking for a trade for him.
Yep.
It was a pretty good team.
Was.
They got to figure out what they're going to do with Tobias, keep him, trade him, whatever. I still think Philly is a competitive team without James Harden. But there are people that I speak to that feel as though if Harden leaves and I'm Embiid, I'm kind of picking my spots, if you will.
Ooh.
Does that make sense?
It does, and that might be tough for a Philly fan to hear.
To your question about Boston, I think the coach is there for a bit. He has the approval of the owner, has the approval of Brad Stevens. I mean, so much so with the owner that when Udoka was still a head coach last season, while the Celtics were in the playoffs playing Milwaukee, the Celtics owner with Grossbeck told me that those guys would sit down and have dinner and really got to know each other, would play horse, and he doesn't typically get close with assistant coaches that way.
Yeah.
I think that the Celtics are going to be looking for some new assistant coaches this offseason. I know that names like Aaron Miles, who was on that staff currently, was a favorite of Ime Udoka, and I know Udoka has a desire to bring Aaron into Houston, as he just brought in Royal Ivey, guy he worked with in Brooklyn. But I think that for Boston, the main priority this summer should be Jaylen Brown, because I know that there'll be no short of suitors. A native born in Atlanta, grew up in Alpharetta, Georgia. The Atlanta Hawks and the Houston Rockets will be calling him this summer, and I think that they should continue the run that they have. But I do know that Jaylen does have a good rapport or had a good rapport during their time in Boston with Ime Udoka, and I know Houston's going to offer him a lot of money.
Can you see something going down where kind of a sign and trade type of deal with for Trae Young in Atlanta, so they could try and get something if they have to do anything like that?
I can't speak to that as of yet.
Okay, because I've seen a lot of rumors about Trae Young. You know, Brooklyn's been hinted at, LA's been hinted at. I've seen Boston, I've seen Houston, I've seen a whole Trae Young's name. There's 29 other teams I think that are calling about Trae Young.
So this is what I'll tell you about Atlanta specifically. I spent about 10 days in Atlanta this season with the Hawks. And there were a couple factors there.
One, Nate McMillan, from what I understand, mutually both the team and Nate ran his course. But the very things that Nate was on him about were the things that were lacking at points during the playoffs.
Yep.
Defensively, and just very old school in his approach. I think a lot of those young guys just did not respond to that. And I know that Quinn Snyder was someone who the Hawks wanted since January and was on vacation. And he kind of just kept saying no. Finally, I mean, it wasn't just Quinn Snyder, from what I'm told. It was also Udoka. Those were the two candidates. And the way that I heard it was in like January was either McMillan will get fired and they'll bring in Snyder or Udoka, or if Doc Rivers was let go in Philly, Silas was let go in Houston, or Unseld was let go in Washington, Udoka would fill one of those spots. And Udoka went to Houston. The point I'm making with this is, in sitting down with Snyder and sitting down with players on that team, there seems to be a mutual respect. I also think that they exceeded expectations early on, and they're trying to get back to that mountaintop. And I think that the thing that's missing is that bona fide star. Like, I think the Knicks are missing the same thing that Atlanta's missing, a bona fide star. A swingman.
Trae Young is that guy?
I think he needs I think Atlanta needs a three-headed monster.
Yep.
And Young, Murray, and whoever else. I think that's what's missing.
I agree with you on the Knicks, too. I think Jalen Brunson's a nice piece. I think they have some hard decisions to make with Julius Randle and RJ Barrett. But I thought, Jalen Brunson was nice. I was happy that I was kind of justified in telling my Knicks friends that they were stupid when they saw how much he was signed for. And they're like, oh, why would you overpay for that guy? And it's like, okay, you guys are going to find out. Now, like, every Knicks fan is like, oh, Jalen Brunson's this great player. And I just kind of want to be like, you guys were all stupid. But I do think the Knicks are on the right path there. And, that is, I agree with you that Trae Young does need a running mate. But I'd be interested to see what type of offers they get and if they're willing to kind of tear it all down and rebuild it. So that's going to be interesting to see what goes on this summer. So the last touch up on the finals, you had the Nuggets beating the Heat. If Boston miraculously comes back, takes over, but wins the series, do you still have the Nuggets beating Boston?
Yes.
That's you're really in on the Nuggets, and I love it because, again, if I get Nikola Jokic versus Butler, it's going to be hard for me to root for either one because I love them both. I think they're both really fun basketball players between Jokic and Butler, so I'm excited for that. This wouldn't be a podcast with Scoop if I didn't talk to you a little bit about the Brooklyn Nets stuff because me and you, I'm a Nets fan. I don't know if you're a Nets fan anymore because you've been in the business for so long, but I know you have an affinity for the Nets considering where you came from when Nets Slam and Planet. The way I look at the Brooklyn Nets roster right now, the only untouchable person is Mikal Bridges. Everybody else, there's guys you would like to keep. You want to keep Cam Johnson. You want to keep Dorian Finney-Smith. You want to keep Nick Claxton. But I don't think anyone else besides Bridges is untouchable. What are you hearing about the Nets right now?
Nothing substantial. I think that the biggest thing is what they're going to do with Cam Johnson. If I'm Brooklyn, I'm looking to find a way to bring Damian Lillard to Brooklyn. And if I'm Philly, I'm trying to do the same thing.
Yep.
But I think Brooklyn has more assets, particularly to start a new franchise. Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, those are guys that you use. You say that you feel like Bridges is the only untouchable. I think Claxton should be too.
I think Claxton should be, but I feel like to bring in a Dame Lillard or even a Trae Young, I feel like that's a guy they may need. And you know what I mean? Like, I feel like him and Cam Johnson are the two guys that it's one or the other. Because I think they're both seen around the league as potential budding superstars. So I feel like it's one or the other that you're going to have to include in order to get a Dame Lillard type guy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I think the if you have the opportunity to bring in Lillard, if you have the opportunity to do better,
you do it. I think Cam Thomas is going to be a star on another team, if not Brooklyn.
I 100% agree. I think, there's some things he still has to work on in his game, but overall, I think he's a really good player. So Jacque Vaughn came in, piss and vinegar, coaching real well. I think towards the end, especially, after KD and Kyrie all, they left and it was kind of him left to just go to his coaching devices. We saw some cracks, but then again, he had a really tough road, right? With getting new guys in and letting them, play. Where do you see Jacque Vaughn this season working with the team and, a full season completely now doing his thing? How do you think he fares as the head coach of this team, bona fide head coach?
I think he gets more comfortable in his role because he has more familiarity with picking his own staff. He brought in Jay Hernandez from the Charlotte Hornets, who, he knew very well from his time their time in Orlando together when Jacque was the head coach. I think a lot of people, they like Jacque Vaughn, but I think they're getting to know his story. Like Jacque went from being a head coach to an assistant for many years to being overlooked to now in this role. And, from the way people in Brooklyn describe him, everybody loves Jacque Vaughn, but now they're getting to know Jacque Vaughn publicly. But I think ever since the KD, Kyrie years, they knew what they were getting, particularly because Jacque comes from San Antonio, and he and Sean Marks have a history there. I think he's kind of in a similar situation that Kenny Atkinson was in during the D'Angelo Russell, Rondae Hollis Jefferson years in Brooklyn. I think he's in a teacher role, like he's creating his own team. It's not the superstar Nets squad. It's his own team with his own identity, and I think he's just going to ride this out.
I certainly think he is. Now, what type of leash do you believe Sean Marks is on right now? Because he's been up in a roller coaster. I know Joe Tsai loves him. Do you think he's locked and secured regardless of what goes on? Or do you think after losing 3 superstars in 2 years, or, that would kind of, I think, get any other GM fired? Sean Marks seems secure, but is there anything that you have an inference of that maybe he's on a shorter leash than we might know?
Some people in Brooklyn say to me, this man has 9 lives.
It's incredible.
Where he's at, and that's to be commendable. That you have that relationship with your team governor, but I don't know that I don't think he's in a short lease situation because I don't think they know what they're going to be just yet. I think that he's given himself about 2 years, and then we'll see what happens in year 3. I think that the Nets produce on the basketball operations side good pieces that go elsewhere and do well. I know, for example, that if Marks was to be let go as currently constructed, Jeff Peterson would be in a good situation in Brooklyn, although he's getting offers and looks in other places. I know the Washington Wizards are a team that has been quietly interested in Jeff's services, but I think Sean is in a good position because he has a good relationship with the owner. But I think where the owner has kind of maneuvered is Nash is his friend. Steve Nash was his friend, and Steve Nash was let go, but Nash was also Mark's friend.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see how long this lasts, what they're going to be, how this materializes. But I think Marks has about a 2-year, 2.5 year, 1.5 to 2 year window.
I will say this. I've been critical of Marks. I think he knows he deserves it as well. I mean, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he has an ego. But I think he knows he deserves a little bit of criticism. You lost 3 superstars. But I will give him this little bit of credit. What he got back from, getting, trading KD and Kai, he did well. Getting back a Dorian Finney-Smith, getting back Bridges, getting back Johnson. Look what that deal did to the Suns. The Suns weren't the same team without Bridges and Johnson. They prevented the Suns from going far. The Mavs, you take Dorian Finney-Smith, their best 3-and-D player, a starter on any team in the NBA because he just does his job and does it well. Sean Marks did a good job there, not only bringing in guys that should be on this team for a long time or will turn around and get a really good piece, and that are also just instrumental good basketball players. So I will give credit where credit is due. For what he had to do in terms of trading those guys, he did get back really solid pieces and one guy who we think could be a budding superstar in Bridges.
I'm with you. I'm with you with all that.
Yep. So overall, I'm still not a huge fan of Sean Marks, but he earned me a little bit of charity. Now go and reconstruct the championship contender again, and I'll be happy. Anyway, let's jump into the last thing here before I let you go because you're a very busy man. All-Star game. Over the last few years, it has been, Team LeBron and Team somebody else picking their rosters, right? A lot of times it was Kevin Durant. Picking their rosters out of a pool of people who were voted on as superstars, as all-stars. There were rumors of it going back to East versus West. Which do you prefer? Do you like this whole entire kind of street ball pick'em type of thing, or would you prefer the East versus West?
East versus West.
I agree. Why? Why do you like East versus West better?
Because that's what I grew up on watching.
I think that I grew up watching guys in different jerseys, not the uniform jerseys. Being successful. I mean, even when you had the Jamaican Pepper All-Star jerseys, it was still cool. It had a look. But yep. I just think over the years, I mean, KD, LeBron are more towards the end than they are the beginning of their career. So, now are we picking Team Trae Young versus Team Luka? It doesn't have the same effect. It was cool for the optics, but I'm kind of an NBA old schooler kind of guy. So I'd like to see it the way it was.
And, I was talking to someone today and we mentioned that. And I like the East versus West because the person I was talking to was a Sixers fan. And I was like, what was cool about it? The fact that I hate your team all year. But when it came to the All-Star game, just the fact that they were on the East team and I'm a fan of the East made me root for guys that I otherwise, once that All-Star game is done, I don't root for them anymore. But if I saw Joel Embiid rocking an East jersey next to Bridges or, if Nick Claxton got in or something like that, I would root for Joel Embiid. And it kind of made it fun in that sense where you're now rooting for guys and just enjoying the pure fun of it. And I also think guys played a little bit harder when it was East versus West because you wanted to have one up on the other conference. It was a little bit of, pride. It wasn't this, it was definitely a, 3-point shooting and dunking fun thing. But it got serious a little bit quicker than it does. At this point, it really doesn't get serious very much at all until the last 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you got a whole quarter of basketball back then, and they intentionally kept it close, and then they started to ball for a quarter. Is my memory wrong there? That's how I felt like I used to watch.
I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Because you had guys like Kobe that didn't want to lose anything. So he would go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just my recollection that we would get that fun stuff for 3 quarters. And then the fourth quarter, it was kind of all right, game on. Like they would keep it close. It would be like 101 to 101 or whatever, 110 to 110. And then they'd start to play some defense and they would start to play hard. And we've had some classic matchups, right? Some great highlights from the All-Star game. Steph Marbury comes to mind of when Stephon Marbury just went off in an All-Star game. And then the fourth quarter, he was the reason East kept staying close. He kept on hitting shots. And I think if there was highlights of him versus Kobe just going to battle. And that's because it got serious at one point. Now it kind of just never gets serious.
Yeah.
Overall, though, I think that the All-Star game to me is kind of a little bit dead. I don't know about you. You probably
it's not the same anymore.
Weekend. Yeah.
Nobody plays defense.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pickup game, but at the same time, these are arguments that people have been having since the beginning of time. I feel like it's for the young people. It's a weekend of just seeing your favorite stars. It's a networking tool if you're blessed to go. It's a launch for sneakers. It's a launch for different apparel, and that's what the All-Star game has always been. And I think from a perspective of just where do we go from here, we have the same arguments about the slam dunk contest.
I was just about to ask you about that. I was just about to ask you about slam dunk. Is Mac McClung going to be back, and is somebody going to step up and challenge him?
I would hope so. But I guess he'd just have to be active, whether that's G League or a team. He definitely has the fans behind him.
So whatever team, just sign him to a G League contract about like 2 weeks before the All-Star game, just so we can get the dunk contest, because that was the best dunk contest I've seen in probably a decade, and it was all because of him. He just tore it down. So, Scoop, as always, it's good talking to you. Thanks for coming on, my brother.
You too, my man.
I always appreciate it. Again, Brandon Scoopy Robinson, lead NBA insider at Bally Sports, host of Scoopy Radio Podcast. Where can people find your podcast, brother?
On all streaming services, everywhere.
And, we talked a lot of hoops today, but Scoopy Radio is not just hoops. He talks to, people in hip hop, people just in culture, other athletes from other sports. So if you're just looking for a good overall show, interesting content, great host, Scoop is the way to go. Scoopy Radio, go find that out and go read his articles. Go look at his, quick hits on Bally Sports. He's the man over there. Again, he's doing a lot with people that, he doesn't know, with no sources, but he does a lot with a little. So once again, Brandon Scoopy Robinson, friend of the show, I appreciate you guys coming on. If you like what you heard, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, spread this word of mouth. Go find us on the socials. We will be back next week. Hopefully David will be back with us. And as always, we'll be here doing our thing. Everyone, thanks so much for listening. So long.